couple of weeks ago, I got a question in my comments section asking if I thought a Porsche Cayman would be a good first car. I think this is a question worth exploring because over the past few years, I've gained a lot of followers that are kind of in that age bracket where you might be considering buying your first car. So first off, I have a list of things that I think make a good first car, and they're in sort of prioritized order. In my opinion, the top criteria for a good first car are that it should be cheap, safe, analog, and practical. Now let's go through how the Cayman matches up to each one of those. The top factor is that it should be cheap. And at first glance, it may seem like the Cayman matches that, at least relatively. I mean, an old 2007 Cayman with relatively high miles like mine cost about $21,000 when I bought it, and it's probably a lot less than that now. So that's clearly in the price range of like a new Civic or a new Fiesta or a new Corolla or something like that, which are other very common first cars. So from a top of the line price tag perspective, it's not that far off. But then you have to consider the truism that any cheap Porsche is actually a $30,000 car. Now, what does that mean? Basically, it means that if you're gonna buy a cheap Porsche, the repair costs, the insurance, and the maintenance and everything like that, it's gonna add up to somewhere closer to $30,000 no matter where you start from. This is especially true for beginning drivers who are looking for a first car. If you're a beginning driver, I would be shocked if your insurance bill is gonna be anything less than like $2,000 a year for a car like this. Not to mention, everything when it comes to maintenance and repair costs is going to be about twice as expensive as any of those typical first cars that I mentioned before. For example, it costs almost $1,000 to get a brand new set of tires, and that's parts, labor, and taxes all included. That's going to be a little bit of a hefty bill for someone who might still be in high school or in college or just starting with their first job. So even though the top of the line price might make it seem like the Porsche Cayman is relatively cheap, I don't think it actually qualifies for that first criteria because all in, it's really not that cheap. The next criteria is that a first car should be safe. Now, I wasn't able to find any crash safety statistics or ratings or anything like that on the 07 Porsche Cayman. However, I was able to find a 987 Porsche Boxster crash test video. And from the looks of it, seems like it fares pretty well. The driver seems like they're not thrown out, and the crumple zone looks decent, and it doesn't seem like it's any more dangerous than any other car from 2007. So from a pure crash test perspective, it's relatively safe. Plus, the Cayman is going to be even safer than a Boxster because it's a hardtop, obviously. So you're going to have better rollover protection and a little bit more chassis rigidity as well. I think the biggest problem when it comes to safety is that the Porsche Cayman is a legitimately fast car. Now, I know it's no 911 and it's not even as fast as like a 5-liter Mustang these days, but it is still a legitimately fast car. 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds and top speed of over 150 miles an hour. I think qualifies as a legitimately fast car for anybody. And I don't think somebody starting out on their first car should jump right into a car as fast as this. Quick is great, like a Miata or a Golf GTI or something like that. Those are quick cars that aren't gonna totally screw you over because a fast car is going to just sort of accentuate all those mistakes that you're inevitably going to make. A $100 mistake in your mom's old Escape is going to turn into a $1,000 Escape or a hospital trip pretty quickly when you get into a Porsche Cayman. The next safety concern that a lot of people will have with a car like this is its size. So small sports cars are, well, small. And this is mostly just a concern here in America where anything that isn't a huge 4x4 with at least 6 seats is considered a small car. So if you're in an accident with the average American car, yeah, you'd probably rather be in something a little bit bigger. That being said, I don't think that's nearly as much of a concern as people make it out to be because, like I said, crash test wise, it's pretty safe. And in some ways, the small size of a Porsche Cayman is an advantage when it comes to sort of being able to nimbly avoid accidents or dangerous situations. and the brakes are good, so you'll be able to stop more quickly to avoid certain accidents than you would in like a normal car like your mom's RAV4. Now, all that being said, the elephant in the room is that the most dangerous part of any beginner's car is the driver. And that brings me to my next point about the Porsche Cayman and about first cars in general, which is that they should be analog. And my Porsche Cayman totally matches this criteria. One of the main reasons why younger drivers get in accidents these days is because they're distracted. Usually something digital is distracting them, whether that's the touchscreen on their phone or the touchscreen on their car, whatever. Those are going to be the biggest distractions for someone driving as a beginner. A car like the Cayman doesn't have anything like that. I think the safest way to go for a beginner car is a manual transmission car with no digital displays and regular hydraulic steering. The Cayman matches all of that. Trust me, if you have a manual transmission, there's really not a lot of texting that you're going to be able to do because you have to keep concentrating on shifting gears and managing the clutch and all that stuff. And the fact that there's no digital controls on this, that it's all physical buttons, means that pretty soon you'll be able to remember where all the buttons and dials are, and you'll never have to take your eyes off the road in order to control the climate or change the radio or the volume or anything like that. I also personally think that it's important for new drivers to really get a feel for how a car actually works when they're driving it. And lane keep assist and park assist and parking cameras and adaptive cruise control and automatic transmissions and all that fancy jazz just kind of insulates you from how the machine itself is interacting with the road. And I think getting a feel for that interaction is super, super important early on when you're learning how to drive or when you're driving your first car. I just think there's inherent value on top of all the safety aspects in getting a feel for how the car is actually reacting to your inputs. I kind of liken it to art school. You've got to pass Drawing 101 before you can move on to oil paints and digital design. The next criteria is practicality. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this topic because I've already made a bunch of videos about how practical the Porsche Cayman is. And if you'd like to go check out those and learn more details about how actually remarkably practical a Porsche Cayman is, you can go ahead and find those videos on my channel. Now, having said that, the Cayman is not as practical as like a 5-door hatchback or even like an old 4-door saloon car. But anyways, I would call the Cayman kind of neutral on the practicality criteria, because even though it is a hatchback and it does have a nice front trunk and space behind the seats, it is still a 2-seater sports car, so it's not going to be as practical as like a Corolla or a Edge or something like that. There's one other very important thing that I feel like I need to add, and it's just my opinion, but I don't think anybody should be driving a Porsche as their first car. The Porsche brand is kind of aspirational, and quite honestly, at the risk of sounding like a grumpy old man, I think someone driving a Porsche as their first car is kind of spoiled, or at least you're going to be seen that way. I think a Porsche is something that you should kind of work your way up to, and I definitely don't think it's something you should be spending your parents' money on. Look, I know I'm pretty privileged. I am a white guy. I grew up in a rich city with highly educated parents, and I was given tons of opportunities. I mean, heck, my grandparents literally just gifted me my first car. It was a 2002 Chevy Malibu, not a Porsche or any other kind of German sports car, but they literally just gave me my first car. So I was able to sell that eventually and use that money, plus money I'd saved up from working hourly jobs, flip that money into buying a Miata. And then once I graduated from college and I got a quote-unquote real job with a steady paycheck, that's when I bought the Porsche Cayman. So even though I got the Porsche Cayman pretty early in life, all things considered, and I had a lot of help from outside sources to get me to that point where I could afford it, I still had to do a little bit of work to get up to that point. And honestly, I think the fact that I had to wait a little bit longer and sort of work towards it a little bit more, that makes me appreciate the car way more than if I had just gotten it as my first car. And I think that makes it more fun and more enjoyable. And at the end of the day, I think that's probably the number one factor for why I wouldn't recommend the Porsche Cayman as your first car. Because you're not going to appreciate it as much if you jump right into the Porsche unless you've had a little bit of experience with something a little bit more in the beater normal first car range. So even if you have the money, that's great. I'm proud of you. Work hard, earn that money to get a cool first car if you really want to. A Miata's a great option. I highly recommend a Miata as a first car. Golf GTI, Civic, anything fun like that is a great option. And seriously, if you can't afford any of those either, there's absolutely no shame in just getting the cheapest, most ratty beater car that you can afford as your first car. There's no shame in that at all. Because even if it's just for a year or so, if you're able to make all your beginner mistakes on a cheaper car and sort of get the feel for what a real normal car feels like, you're going to end up appreciating a Porsche Cayman all that much more. And it's going to be a much more enjoyable and thrilling ownership experience once you do have a Porsche Cayman of your own. So all you people who want to jump right into the Cayman, don't worry. You're going to get there. If you're passionate about it and you're willing to put the work in, it'll be yours soon. Just maybe let yourself make a few mistakes in a different car first. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and share this video and subscribe and all that jazz and buy the merch. This is a new shirt I'm wearing today. It's actually a map of Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where I am now. So if you're a fan of Ann Arbor, I guess you can buy this shirt too on Redbubble. You can also wear my classic Porsche Cayman shirt as well. So anyways, thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next one.